There's a moment, quiet, sharp, unforgettable, when someone tells you no. The job you poured your soul into doesn't call back. The person you love says they don't feel the same. Your dream slips through your fingers, not with a bang, but with a silence so heavy it feels like gravity turned against you. Rejection isn't just a closed door. It's a wound that echoes. And what makes it so powerful isn't the word itself, it's what it whispers to you afterward. You're not enough. You're not wanted. You don't belong. But let me tell you something few people dare to believe: rejection is not the end. It's the beginning of the greatest story you'll ever tell, if you have the courage to write it. History never remembers the ones who gave up after the first no. It remembers those who fell, and then built a fortress from the very bricks thrown at them. Thomas Edison was told he was too stupid to learn anything. He was fired from 2 jobs for being unproductive. His teachers called him unteachable. But that man went on to hold over 1,000 patents and change the world with his inventions. J.K. Rowling was a single mother on welfare, her manuscript rejected by 12 different publishers. Today, her stories live on the shelves of millions, and her world-building shaped the imaginations of generations. Michael Jordan, yes, the basketball legend, was once cut from his high school basketball team. Imagine that. Told he wasn't good enough. He cried in his room that night. But he didn't let that be the final chapter. What separates them from the rest isn't talent alone, it's a decision. A decision to turn the burn of rejection into the fuel of transformation. Because here's the truth: rejection is not personal. It feels personal because it touches our identity. But often, it's situational. It's timing. It's someone else's limitation projected onto you. It's the world saying not now, not never. But we internalize it. We wear it like armor that only weighs us down. We build walls to protect ourselves from feeling that sting again. And in doing so, we shut ourselves off from the very opportunities we crave. The comeback starts the moment you stop running from rejection and start leaning into it. Not with bitterness. Not with revenge. But with clarity, discipline, and an unshakable belief that your worth is not up for negotiation. Let me take you somewhere else now. Deeper. Imagine a young man sitting alone on a bench in the cold, in the dead of night. His dreams just shattered. Another door slammed in his face. The shame crawling up his spine. That man could be anyone. An artist, an athlete, a father, a son. But what matters is what he does next. He stands up. Not because he feels ready, but because staying down feels like death. And so begins the slow climb, the quiet days of rebuilding when no one is watching. The early mornings where motivation is a whisper and discipline becomes the only voice he trusts. The failures that come again, but now sting less, because he's grown used to the fire. The wins that are small at first, barely noticeable, but they stack, one upon another, until something changes. Not the world. Him. That's the comeback. It doesn't begin when you prove others wrong. It begins when you prove yourself right. Every great comeback has this one thing in common. The person chose to rewrite the meaning of their pain. They saw rejection not as a wall, but as a mirror. A challenge. A test of resolve. It forces you to ask, who are you without the applause? Who are you when no one believes in you? Who are you when the thing you wanted most slips through your hands? And if you can answer that with truth, with honesty, with fire, you're already on your way back. Let me tell you a story. A friend of mine, an actor, spent a decade hearing the word no. Casting calls, auditions, callbacks, always close, never chosen. At one point, he was living out of his car, eating one meal a day. People told him to give up, to move on, to be realistic. But he didn't stop. Not because he was sure he'd make it, but because he knew he'd never forgive himself if he quit. 10 years of silence. Then one yes. One breakthrough roll. The phone wouldn't stop ringing after that. When asked later what kept him going, he said something I'll never forget. I wasn't trying to prove them wrong. I was trying to stay loyal to the part of me that believed in something bigger than this moment. That is the power you carry. The world will tell you to measure success by how many people say yes to you. But real strength is measured by how you respond to the no's. You may have been rejected by a person, a company, a dream, but that rejection can be the forge that strengthens your will. It's in the silence after the fall that you discover who you really are. Not the version of you they rejected, the version that's rising in spite of it. And remember this, rejection isn't a stop sign. It's a redirection. A ruthless, often painful teacher, but one that never lies. The comeback doesn't happen overnight. It's forged in solitude. In the days when doubt lingers like smoke and you choose to act anyway. In the decisions that feel invisible. Waking up early, putting in the work, speaking when your voice shakes, applying again, showing up again, dreaming again. Because here's the twist, rejection is the initiation. It's the fire every champion must pass through. And the only ones who come out burned are the ones who stop walking. The shift begins subtly. There's no applause. No grand moment announcing your return. Just a quiet resilience growing inside you, louder than the doubt that used to control your mind. You begin to see rejection differently now, not as a curse, but as a cleansing. It stripped away the illusions, the need for approval, the dependency on external validation. What's left is raw, undiluted purpose. And that kind of purpose doesn't beg for permission. It doesn't knock on doors, it builds its own. You start showing up in rooms you were once afraid to enter. Not because you feel superior, but because you understand now, rejection doesn't diminish your value. It merely reveals what needs to be sharpened. It becomes a map, showing you where you need to grow, where your foundations are weak, and where your deepest strength hides. Some people never recover from rejection because they confuse temporary failure with permanent identity. But you've seen through that illusion. You've tasted the bitterness, and instead of letting it poison you, you've turned it into fuel. Now you wake up with a different fire. You're not chasing applause anymore. You're chasing alignment. You're no longer asking, "Do they want me?" You're asking, "Is this where I belong?" And that changes everything. The people around you start to notice. Not because you're louder, but because you carry something deeper now, a quiet certainty. You're not rushing anymore. You're building. And even if no one else sees the blueprint, you do. You've memorized every brick of your comeback. There's a beauty in that loneliness, in that quiet climb. Because every step up, every ounce of progress, it's yours. No one gave it to you. You earned it in the silence. And it can never be taken from you again. And then, the moment comes. Maybe it's a phone call. An opportunity. A door you once knocked on finally opens. And this time, they say yes. But strangely, it doesn't feel like salvation. It feels like recognition. Because you no longer need it. You're already whole. Already powerful. Already free. That's the secret the world doesn't tell you. The best comebacks don't start with external victories. They start the day you stop needing them to feel worthy. And now you walk into rooms with your head held high, not because you were accepted, but because you accepted yourself. The person who was once shattered by rejection is now unshakable. Not because they avoided pain, but because they walked straight through it and kept going. You see the world differently now. You no longer fear rejection. You respect it. You welcome it. Because every time someone tells you no, you no longer hear a judgment. You hear a challenge. And you've become the kind of person who rises to every single one. There will be more doors. Some will still close. Some will still hurt. But none of them will define you. You've already written your story. A story of fire. A story of grit. A story of a soul that refused to quit. A story of a comeback no one saw coming, except you. Because the truth is, real comebacks don't have endings. They evolve. They deepen. They multiply into other areas of your life. What started as one rejection, one door slammed, one heart broken, one dream denied, becomes the seed for 100 victories, each one rooted in the lesson that pain teaches better than comfort ever could. Now you begin to move differently. Your silence is no longer hesitation. It's calculation. Your calm is not weakness. It's power under control. You've been burned, but you carry no bitterness, only wisdom. And that wisdom has sharpened your vision. You no longer chase every opportunity. You wait. You prepare. You align yourself with what truly fits the person you've become. There's a certain elegance to someone who has suffered and didn't break. You can see it in the way they walk, grounded, deliberate. In the way they speak, slow, thoughtful, with a voice that doesn't need to compete for attention. That's what rejection gave you. Not defeat, but depth. And now, when others crumble at the first sign of resistance, you don't. You've built a core no one can see, but everyone can feel. You've learned to carry your rejections not as shame, but as scars of honor. Each one proof that you lived, that you tried, that you stood in the arena while others hid in comfort. There's something magnetic about that kind of resilience. The world starts to respond to you differently, not because it suddenly changed, but because you did. People feel safer around you, inspired by you. They wonder how you move with such grace through storms that would have drowned them. And here's the deeper layer. Now that you've learned how to survive your own rejection, you become a refuge for others. You recognize the pain in their silence, the fear behind their forced smiles. And because you've walked that path, you reach out, not with advice, but with presence. Because presence is what you craved when you were down. Someone to say, "I see you. I know. Keep going." That's the full circle. The comeback isn't complete until it becomes someone else's survival guide. Your story becomes more than yours. It becomes light in someone else's dark tunnel. A reminder that no is not the end. It's the start of something bigger than you could imagine. You've gone from being rejected to being unshakable, to being a guide. And it doesn't stop there. Because once you realize rejection cannot destroy you, you start to dream differently. Bigger. Wilder. Fearlessly. You take risks others wouldn't dare take because failure no longer terrifies you. It energizes you. You know now that every setback is just a sharpening blade, sculpting you into something stronger. So you leap. And even if you fall, you rise again. Not because you're reckless, but because you trust the process. You've been down before, and you know what's waiting at the bottom. Not defeat, but discovery. That's the mindset of someone who has transformed rejection into power. That's how the once forgotten become impossible to ignore. ChatGPT said, "You begin to understand that the comeback is no longer just about proving yourself. It's about building something timeless, something that lives beyond applause, beyond failure, beyond anyone's opinion. You're no longer chasing validation. You're creating legacy. And legacy isn't built in one moment. It's not defined by your biggest win or your worst loss. It's built in the countless days when no one is watching, when you rise before the sun, when you train alone, when you fail quietly and still keep showing up. That's where greatness is born. In the shadows. In the silence. Now, rejection doesn't push you back, it pulls you forward. You've rewired your nervous system to associate resistance with opportunity. You've trained your soul to see closed doors not as rejection, but as divine redirection. When something doesn't work out, your first question is no longer why me, but what's the lesson? Where's the growth? And every time you ask those questions, you step closer to mastery. You become dangerous in the most beautiful way, Not because you seek to harm, but because you cannot be controlled. You've made peace with discomfort. You've embraced solitude. You've outgrown the need to be chosen, because you've already chosen yourself. The world senses that. People start to listen differently when you speak. Opportunities find you. Not because of luck, but because you're in alignment now. No longer chasing what isn't meant for you, but drawing in exactly what is. And here's the irony. The same people who once overlooked you, doubted you, dismissed you, they'll come back. They'll tell others they always knew you'd make it. They'll want to be close again, to rewrite the memory of how they once saw you. But by then, you won't be angry. You won't need revenge. You won't even be interested in proving anything. Because you've realized your worth was never something to debate. It was always there, buried beneath layers of rejection, waiting for you to uncover it. You now walk through the world with quiet power. You don't need to yell. You don't need to convince. You don't need to compete. You simply are. Anchored. Clear. Unstoppable. That's what the comeback really gives you. Not just success, but sovereignty. Not just applause, but freedom. And it all began the moment you were told no. So, the next time rejection knocks at your door, don't flinch. Don't fold. Open it. And smile. Because now, that no might just be the beginning of everything. You start to feel it in your bones. Not just the victory, but the transformation. The version of you that once sat in silence, wounded by the weight of rejection, is gone. In its place stands someone forged in adversity, someone who doesn't just survive the storm, but walks directly into it, because now you understand something most people never will. The storm was never sent to destroy you. It was sent to reveal you. You become the kind of person who no longer asks for the path to be easier. You ask to be stronger. The pain no longer haunts you. It humbles you. It sharpens your decisions. It deepens your empathy. Because you remember what it felt like to be overlooked, to be dismissed, to be told you're not it. And now, when you look back, you don't feel bitterness. You feel gratitude. Gratitude for the moments that didn't go your way. For the doors that closed. For the people who said no. Because they unwittingly handed you the gift of clarity. Of self-reliance. Of unshakable grit. And in time, something unexpected happens. You begin to rise not in spite of rejection, but because of it. Every scar becomes a sentence in your story. Every failure, a foundation. Every no, a compass pointing you toward the yes that actually matters. That's the difference between those who crumble and those who conquer. One lets rejection define their future. The other lets it refine their future. You've chosen the latter. You've stared into the eyes of disappointment and said, "Is that all you've got?" And in doing so, you unlocked a power that most people only glimpse in movies or books, the power of resilience tethered to purpose. You become like iron folded in fire. Beautiful, strong, unbreakable, and what's more, useful. Because now, others are watching. Quietly, carefully. Some of them are right where you once were, sitting in silence, heartbroken, doubting everything. And they see you, not as someone who had it easy, but as someone who made it through the impossible. You might never meet them. You may never know their names. But you become proof that it's possible. Proof that rejection isn't a death sentence, it's a doorway. Proof that when life strips everything away, what's left is not emptiness, but essence. And here's where the comeback story evolves into something even greater. You stop needing the world to give you anything. Because you've already built everything that matters from within. You've crafted peace in chaos. Discipline in disorder. Confidence in doubt. You've become the architect of your own rise. And that cannot be faked. You no longer live in fear of rejection. You welcome it. You invite it. Because you've seen how it breaks the weak and builds the chosen. And now that you've been broken open and rebuilt by your own hands, you begin to live on a different frequency. You no longer chase, you attract. Not because you're trying to impress, but because your presence speaks louder than your words. People sense it in the way you hold yourself, in the way you listen without needing to speak, in the way you no longer seek the spotlight, because you've already lit a fire inside that no stage can match. The comeback becomes less about arriving somewhere and more about becoming someone. You don't wake up each day wondering if you'll succeed. You wake up knowing you already have, because you've earned the one thing no rejection can take from you, your integrity, the truth of who you are, what you've built, what you've endured, and the way you still choose to love, still choose to lead, still choose to believe, even when belief costs you everything. You begin to notice how rejection becomes less frequent, not because the world suddenly changes its mind, but because you've stopped applying for rooms that don't deserve you. You've outgrown the need to fit in. Now you're building your own table, your own vision, your own legacy. And still, the world tests you. It always does. The difference now is you welcome the test. You nod at it. Because the one who's been through fire no longer fears heat. You start to teach others, not by preaching, but by living. Your consistency, your focus, your quiet refusal to quit becomes its own language. A language that those still in the depths of rejection recognize instantly. They follow your footsteps, even if they never say a word. Because you've become what the world desperately needs. Not a celebrity, not a guru, but a reminder that human resilience is real, that it's possible to lose everything and still rise, not as you were, but as someone wiser, deeper, and more powerful than before. And just when you think your story has reached its peak, life hands you a moment, a mirror of your past, another no, another betrayal, another failure. But this time, you don't flinch, you don't retreat, you smile, not out of arrogance, but recognition. Because this time, you know how this story ends. Or rather, how it continues. You've done it before. And now you'll do it again. Not because it's easy, but because you've become the kind of person who does not break. The kind of person who understands. Every setback sharpens the blade. Every fall teaches the climb. Every rejection is a call to rise, and you answer it every time. And with each rise, your movements become more intentional, your decisions more deliberate. You no longer rush toward goals just to silence the voice of inadequacy, because that voice is gone, burned away in the crucible of everything you've survived. Now, you move with clarity. You choose your path not to prove anything, but because it's yours. You've reclaimed something priceless, your inner authority. That unshakable compass that doesn't waver when the crowd doubts you, or when success takes its time. You've stopped negotiating with your value. You no longer wait for validation before taking the next step. You walk forward, even if no one applauds. Even if no one notices. Because now you know, true power doesn't scream. It whispers. And still commands the room. The people who once doubted you, they start to imitate you. They mimic your language, adopt your habits, try to walk the way you walk. But they can't replicate the depth. Because what you carry can't be copied. It was earned. Every part of you was paid for in full. In silence, in rejection, in the nights you almost gave up. But you didn't. And now, the weight of what you've built sits on your shoulders not as a burden, but as a crown. You wear it humbly, because you remember. You remember when you were on the floor. You remember when hope was a whisper drowned out by fear. You remember when one more no felt like it would break you. But it didn't. Because deep down, even in your lowest moments, there was a fire that never went out. Maybe it flickered. Maybe it dimmed. But it never died. And now it burns brighter than ever, not to destroy, but to illuminate, to guide you, and maybe even to light the way for others who are still in the dark. Because that's the quiet gift of rejection. It makes you human. It humbles you. It strips away what doesn't matter and leaves you with the essence of who you truly are. Not the curated version. Not the version they wanted. But the version forged in truth. And now that you've found that version, you protect it. You honor it. You no longer shape yourself to fit in. You shape your world around who you've become. You've stepped beyond the game of proving, beyond the race for attention. You live in a different space now, one where peace is more valuable than applause, and purpose is worth more than praise. So when the next challenge comes, and it will, you don't panic. You smile. You lean in. Because you understand that what tried to break you before only made you stronger. And what stands in your way now is already yours to conquer.